Okay, it looks like most people have joined now, so I think we'll get going on this alumni speaker event. And so I just want to say good afternoon to all our alumni, students, staff, faculty, friends, and community members. Welcome to today's very fascinating session of the Alumni Speaker Series. My name is Mary Wells, and I'm so proud and privileged to be the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering here at the University of Waterloo. Today, our panel of experts from academia and industry will discuss the challenges and opportunities that come with bridging the gap between biology and engineering as they work to solve some of medical science's most vexing and costly problems. I know when I looked at what some of the topics would be, I felt really excited about this. It's very timely. Thanks to the rapid progress of additive manufacturing technology advancements and research, the biomedical industry is opening thrilling new frontiers that are dramatically improving patient outcomes. Now, with the ability to use ceramics, polymers, and advanced metallic materials in the additive manufacturing process, the range of customized implantable medical devices is poised to be greatly and safely expanded. In today's sessions, these experts will talk about the current additive manufacturing technology and its potential in future applications with a multidisciplinary approach that combines the principles of material science, engineering, biomechanics, molecular biology, pharmaceuticals, and extended clinical monitoring. Today's session is being moderated by Mihaela Vlasea. Mihaela is an assistant professor in the Department of Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering, as well as the associate director of our MSAM research facility. Mihaela earned her undergraduate and PhD degrees from the University of Waterloo in 2008 and 2014, respectively, and has been a professor here at the University of Waterloo since 2014. We are very, very lucky to have her. And I must say, one of her colleagues referred to her as the rock star of additive manufacturing. So we're so pleased to have her with us. As always, we welcome your questions and we'll answer as many as we can in this session. I know I am really excited to learn more about these exciting advancements in additive manufacturing and its potential in solving some of medical science's problems. Mihaela, I will now pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to welcome you, our audience, and the talented group of panelists to today's alumni speaker session. And a big thank you to our Dean Mary Wells for setting the tone for today's discussion. Really, technology advancements that support the biomedical and healthcare sectors have never been more relevant than in today's climate. Before we begin, let's go over 3 important housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on YouTube for viewing. A link of the recording will be sent out to you after the session in the coming days. And very important, please submit your questions in the Q&A text box and we will answer as many of them as possible during the event, as well as at the end during the Q&A session with the panelists. I'm extremely enthusiastic to be the moderator for today's Alumni Speaker Series session. We are hosting panelists with a diverse background, but with a unique mission of addressing advancements in biomedical engineering through digital technologies. We live in exciting times. Innovations in additive manufacturing processes, or more commonly referred to as 3D printing technologies, are now enabling new opportunities in the biomedical sector, specifically in developing medical devices made of metallic, ceramic, or polymer materials. In this context, researchers at the University of Waterloo, as well as local industry, create a uniquely Canadian ecosystem where interdisciplinary research in material science, design optimization, biomechanics, molecular biology, pharmaceutical sciences, and clinical testing bring forth new products spanning from orthopedic implants to prosthetic to drug delivery devices. Our panelists today will reveal how their R&D impacts the biomedical field and how research translates to products or technologies that can benefit patients directly. We have 5 panelists today. It's one of the busiest panel sessions I've been involved with, who will present a brief synopsis of their work. I'll just list them briefly and then we'll start the session. Professor Stuart McLuhan from Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering, Professor Thomas Willett from Systems Design Engineering, Professor Boxin Zhao from the Department of Chemical Engineering, Professor Emmanuel Ho, School of Pharmacy and appointed to the Chemical Engineering Department, and A. Nyein San, an alumni of the Systems Design Engineering Program, class of 2004, and presently the CTO at Cosm Medical Corp. With that, our first panelist, Professor Stuart McLuhan, is an assistant professor in the Department of Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering. Dr. McLachlin is leading a new research program in orthopedic mechatronics at the University of Waterloo. This program brings together biomechanical modeling and simulation of human joint mechatronics with the design and manufacturing of next generation orthopedic implants and related technologies. And really his expertise and reputation in orthopedic biomechatronics and biomechanics has been recognized through awards. I've listed here a few from the Cervical Spine Research Society, Canadian Orthopedic Association, and the International Society for Computer-Aided Surgery. So let's give the stage to Professor McLachlin to describe his R&D.
Thanks, Mihaela. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody today. So I'm excited to tell you about our research in the area of next generation spinal implants as part of the Orthopedic Mechatronic Laboratory at the University of Waterloo. So my name is Stuart McLuhan, and yeah, let me tell you more about what we're doing. So for thousands of Canadians and millions of individuals around the world each year, spinal fusion surgery is a necessary treatment for a range of spinal disorders, including degeneration, trauma, deformity, and cancer. Accordingly, these disorders represent tremendous socioeconomic burden, with billions of dollars spent annually on healthcare costs. In many of these operations, the surgeon will create a small opening to access the spine to perform the required intervention. This often necessitates reconstruction and stabilization of the vertebral column through the use of spinal implants. These implants are used to create rigid stabilization to enable the spinal fusion or the bone-on-bone healing to occur. And this takes place over a long period of time. So these implants play a really important role in successful patient outcomes from spine surgery to eliminate pain and restore function and mobility, which is obviously near and dear to most people's livelihoods. The success of the surgery relies on safe and effective implant insertion and ultimately strength with the connection to bone. Unfortunately, with many challenges, such as, again, diseases like osteoporosis, which have a reducing on the bone density and bone quality, can lead to challenging implant complications, including implant loosening, breakage, subsidence, and also misplacement. And these unfortunate outcomes lead to ultimately failed surgery, which has, again, given the number of people involved in this and the costs, this is, again, a tremendous burden. And so what our group tries to do is figure out how we can address these biomechanical challenges to improve patient outcomes and, again, reduce the risk of failed surgery. Unfortunately, there's not really any great solutions that have addressed this to date, but this is where something like additive manufacturing, and especially the advances in additive manufacturing, open up new design possibilities to address these biomechanical challenges. So this is some of the areas that we look at, and again, just a couple of examples for you today. One would be the idea of when you have a disease like osteoporosis, you have reduced bone density and reduced bone quality. So again, similar to hanging a large painting on your wall, you would want to enhance the strength of that anchor. And so you might use a drywall anchor. So we had the same type of concept for the spine. Could we use an expanding type implant that once inserted into the spine safely, it could be expanded to increase the strength of the screw? What 3D printing enabled us to do, and more specifically metal additive manufacturing, was we were able to present a number of design concepts to identify which design features would enable us to achieve the most implant expansion. And one of the novel ones that we came up with was this helical cut. We're able to achieve, you can see here, the implant has been expanded post-insertion and is buttressing up against dense bone to increase the strength. And so this represented a really exciting opportunity for us from the design perspective, and was able to show through biomechanical testing an improved fixation strength compared to the existing clinically used implants. And again, for a disease like osteoporosis, this potentially opens up new opportunities to treat these patients that may have been unable to accept current. So we're continuing to work on this. Another one that I want to tell you about through the design for additive manufacturing is when you have very complex and challenging and difficult surgeries. And one of these in particular is the fixation of the upper cervical spine just beneath the base of your skull. This is a very challenging area to put implants in because the vertebrae are very small. And so inserting screws around these high-risk neurovascular structures is very stressful, as you can imagine, for the orthopedic surgeon. One of our colleagues suggested that we could, one of our surgical colleagues suggested that we could use a clamp type design. And so working with our additive manufacturing partners, they were able to come up with a new design, which was an articulating clamp design, which was very novel and again was pursued by our colleagues for commercialization. One of the challenges that they faced with this novel implant design was how do you eventually treat the most number of patients with this design in terms of how it should be sized. And so we did another study where we looked at what is the anatomical variation of the vertebrae, so that we know how much anatomical shape variation we need to account for in the implant design. So we did this anatomical study where we performed a technique known as statistical shape modeling to look at what's the variation in the shape of especially this is for older adults. So what's the shape variation that we need to encounter for those, basically the sizing of that implant, such that we can bring that design space back to the implant to produce devices that are going to work well for the largest number of people. So this is just a small sample of I think the opportunities that we're encountering for areas of growth in additive manufacturing to address sort of unmet challenges in orthopedic spine surgery. And again, we continue to work forward to improve patient outcomes as a result. So thanks for your time this morning. And here's if you're interested further, you can look us up on the Waterloo website, and here's my email as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Stuart. And I really want to encourage the audience members to type up their questions in the Q&A box. And specifically, as we will be following up with answers towards the end of the session. Our next panelist, Thomas Willett, is an assistant professor in the Department of Systems Design Engineering. He's also the director of the Composite Biomaterial Systems Laboratory. His research interests concern skeletal biomaterials and tissues. In his research, he specializes in bone quality and fragility by developing an improved understanding of the mechanisms that determine the mechanical behavior and failure of bone and collagen. He also works with musculoskeletal tissue banks and focuses on the development of 3D printable nanocomposite biomaterials for skeletal reconstruction. To talk more about these research areas, let's welcome Professor Willett.
Thank you, Mihaela, and it's great to be here. And hopefully on my screen you can see on your screen you can see my slides. So yeah, I direct the Waterloo Composite Biomaterials Systems Lab, and today I'm going to speak specifically about the 3D printable biomaterials that we're developing for bone reconstruction applications. So we're specifically motivated by large bone defects that are extremely challenging to treat. And so these are defects that are larger than what our body is capable of repairing by itself. And on the left side of the screen here, you see a femur, so the upper leg bone, if you will. The femur has been reconstructed with a large number of metal hardware, but inside the two plates that are on the outer edges there is a piece of allograft bone. So bone that's been donated by somebody who has died and left their body to the tissue banks for medicine. And so these large defects can result from cancer, as in the case in this X-ray, but also from extreme trauma, infection, and things like that. And so, like I mentioned, they're very challenging to treat. And so we are approaching this problem trying to leverage additive manufacturing along with next generation biomaterials that we can 3D print. And so the workflow is depicted here from a review article where the patient would be scanned with CT scan. Those scans would be turned into a model, and maybe that model would be manipulated for design purposes to have a CAD design for a custom implant for that patient, and then in the, it would be printed, and we'd have a customized scaffold that we could implant in the patient to repair their defect. And in our case, we're concerned with developing materials that are, of course, biocompatible, so they will work inside the body without adverse effects, but also that they'll be that they will remodel. And what we mean by that is that the patient cells, the bone cells specifically, will break the implant down and turn it into new living tissue. So in our case, being bone. Of course, we want to have sufficient mechanical properties over the duration of the implant service, and we're developing them to be 3D printable so that we can do patient customization and anatomical matching. And then certainly in the future, well, even now, materials are being developed that are printable and can deliver appropriate drugs, say if you wanted to ward off or treat a severe infection. So in our case, we're combining the additive manufacturing with what we call next generation biomaterials. So ours are 3D printable and multifunctional nanocomposites. And so we're taking this nanocomposite approach because nanocomposites can provide that multifunctionality. In our case, it also mimics bone itself, which bone is a composite of bone mineral and the proteins that hold it all together. In our case, we're using a biopolymer, which we call AESO, combined with nanohydroxyapatite, which mimics the mineral phase of bone, and polyethylene glycol diacrylate, which helps to disperse the particles. And in the presentation today, I'm showing you a technique, one of the few techniques that we use, and this is called masked stereolithography. And in our case, we use a printer that has been developed for the dental implant manufacturing industry. And so this assembles the whatever the object is that we're printing layer by layer into a pretty much whatever geometry we would like. And so here in the middle, you can see the dispersion of the nanoparticles down in the submicron scale. And we've done a lot of in vitro testing with bone cells to show that bone cells really like these nanocomposites. So that's promising as we move towards preclinical testing. And so far, our mechanical properties are exceeding those of the ISO standard for bone cement. So we're heading in the right direction in terms of having mechanically competent prints. And so here's some examples of the printing process. So this technique actually prints our materials upside down. So here you can see a skull and the implant that would treat the defect in the skull here, and it's printed upside down. And here's the final result with the plate in place. So that's one example. And getting back to the original X-ray I showed you, here is the idea where we would like to replace the bone allograft and as much of the other materials, the metallic parts as well, with a 3D printed anatomy matching print that can be used to reconstruct such a defect. So that's what we're up to in the Waterloo Composite Biomaterials Systems Lab. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Thomas, and thank you so much for everybody on the line who have been submitting questions in the background. And I encourage you to submit questions for Thomas's presentation as well. We'll keep track of those, and hopefully we'll be able to tackle as many as possible at the end. On to our next presenter. Professor Boxin Zhao is a member of the Waterloo Institute of Nanotechnology, Institute of Polymer Research. He's also a member of the Center for Bioengineering and Biotechnology at the University of Waterloo. He also established the Surface Science and Biomaterials Laboratory in 2008. The laboratory has been well known for its interdisciplinary research capacity to take on both fundamental and applied research projects. His group looks to address industrial challenges and societal needs alike. His research interests are quite vast and include smart polymers, sustainable polymers, microplastic degradation, a whole long list, all the way to soft materials and interface, biomimetic adhesion, as well as electrically conductive polymers and adhesives. Here to talk more about a lot of exciting research is Professor Zhao.
Thank you, Mihaela. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, share part of my research. The research interest in my lab overall is work on bio-nano provide solutions to the sustainability and human well-beings, mainly use on polymer composites, but one focus on the surface phenomena, including liquid-liquid, solid-liquid, solid-solid, friction, lubrication, and surface deformation as well, emulsion. This is the typical topic in the field of chemical engineering. These days, they play a very important role in the development of new technology for soft material and for example, robotic. So some research work on these like geckos. For 10 years also, we work on we call biomimicry. We learn from natural organism. Gecko is one example. Lotus leaf, zebra mussels, even the sea cucumber. We learn from their unique properties and extract engineer principle, use them to design synthetic one. For example, the so robotic, something like a gecko feet. That's a large scale. Down to nano scale, we synthesize new material. This one is a nanoparticle, polymer nanoparticle, and nanofibers. So they have unique conductivity, which you can use as a filler, even as a sensor as well, to sense the environment. Another thread of research focuses on the polymer gels. You can see this network with some liquid, including water, organic solvents, even some hybrid gels. So one example I will show you in a moment is the gel can change the stiffness from very soft to very rigid. It's a stiffening changing material. In the next two slides, I'll share two particular example projects. One is on the soft electronic. For years, we have worked on the water-based polyurethane system. Polyurethane is a very well-known, very used in construction in our daily life. But now we see the potential for emerging electronic applications. This is a chain of polymer. We make it latex in water, dispersed in water, just like a paint. Then we can print it onto textile, make a surface conductive. It's a e-textile, electronic textile. Or we can print in different shapes, different patterns. This is one of the printer we can use. Utilize a unique nano-micron structure. We can tune the properties, conductivity, transparency. We use it for smart window, for antenna as well. This is one example we did last year. We designed a soft antenna which can work in the wet condition. Even they can tolerate the water to have self-healing behavior. Overall, what we're doing is we use like polymer, mainly water-based polymer for environmental friendliness, incorporates functional micron nanoparticles or electrolyte, polyelectrolyte, the charged polymer, to form colloidal composite, which we can coat or print into different shapes for flexible, stretchable electronic, even smart windows. The second example I'll share with you is on the recent advance from my lab. We call this a hybrid material. It's a gel. It's a gel polymer with a salt. This material have very unique properties. They can change the stiffness from very soft, like a tongue, or very stiff, like a piece of wood. at the same condition, so that we can two stable states. And another unique property, we can print. Here we use a syringe, a needle to doodle it, make a sea cucumber shape or teddy bear as well. So that is, we use the printing technique to make the shapes. The key is the property can change stiffness. When it's soft, deformable, make a customer design shape. When they rigid, become fixed structure. Overall, we are a polymer material developer, work with industry, even we our own business as well to commercialize some technology for the human, for the society and the human well-being is to promote the applications. I think that's all for today's share. Any question, please submit to the chat. I can answer it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Zhao. And indeed, I do encourage you to submit your questions. We've had quite a few questions submitted already. Hopefully you'll make it. If not, we'll follow up after the event. Thank you so much. Our next panelist, Emmanuel Ho, is the Associate Professor at the School of Pharmacy and is cross-appointed to the Department of Chemical Engineering. Professor Emmanuel Ho is a member of the Waterloo Institute for Nanotechnology and the Center for Bioengineering and Biotechnology. His research interests include the development and characterization of targeted drug delivery systems, nanomedicines and medical devices for imaging, treatment, and prevention of diseases, including HIV/AIDS, chronic wounds, and cancer. Dr. Ho is the co-founder and CEO of the Asli Technologies focused on synthesizing eco-inks for 3D biomedical printing applications and the CSO for Therphage Bio focused on bacteriophage-based immunotherapeutics. And he is also the co-host of the Not So Serious Science podcast. Let's welcome Professor Emmanuel Ho.
Thank you very much, Mihaela, for the kind introduction. Thank you for the invitation to allow me to speak and share some of the research that's happening within my group. So our research team is mainly focused on developing a variety of different biomaterials and drug delivery systems for addressing, some of the, I guess, disease states that kind of affects individuals globally. So, for example, we have developed combination therapies that utilize nanomedicines to, for example, accelerate wound healing and increase antibacterial activity in chronic wounds such as diabetic foot ulcers. We also utilize a variety of different techniques to develop medical devices, implantables, really to provide prolonged drug release, for example, over a 30-day period. We've also designed nanomedicines that are more specifically able to target specific cell types. For example, in this example, we try to design it to target delivery to immune cells, which are basically the target cells for HIV infection. We've also developed, microfluidic diagnostic devices using 3D printing, and again, have used and designed nanomedicines for targeting various aspects of the HIV infection process. So today, I really want to kind of focus more on how we're utilizing additive manufacturing to develop implant systems for preventing HIV infection. As you can see here on the left-hand side, this is what we call an intravaginal ring. This intravaginal ring is very similar to the FDA-approved NuvaRing for contraception. In this little video that you see here, this is what we call a segmented intravaginal ring, where, for example, we can 3D print different types of ring segments that can be designed to deliver different drugs, really. So this will allow you to deliver, for example, a hydrophobic drug and a hydrophilic drug at the same time. On the right-hand image, as you can see, we use 3D printing to develop these implants that have different structures to cater to the different animal models, for example. So, the far right is something what you expect to be used in humans. Okay, it will be inserted into the female genital tract of women. the image labeled C is what we have evaluated in non-human primates. And then, for example, B is something for rabbits. And then as you get smaller, potentially we can evaluate our design in a rodent model. So we're developing a variety of different implants and scaffolds right now with the focus of preventing HIV infection. As you can see here on this slide, we've evaluated how we can use 3D printing to control drug release rates. Right now, as you saw from my very first slide, we combine nanomedicine with medical device design. So here, for example, we wanted to utilize 3D printing to help control the rate in which nanoparticles are released from our implant system. So just to kind of give you a brief idea, as you can see, 3D printing has the advantage of allowing us to create these different pore sizes to control rate of release. As you can see, we evaluated, for example, structures that have more of a rectilinear structure versus a triangular, as well as different infill densities. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we can actually, by modifying the infill density as well as the pore structures, we're able to control the rate of nanoparticle release over a 2-week period. So in addition to developing these scaffolds and medical devices, we're also interested in developing stimuli responsive biomaterials as well for these various applications. So I just want to also take this opportunity to kind of highlight and acknowledge my team for the work that they've been doing, as well as the various funding agencies. So yeah, I just wanted to keep this very brief and kind of introduce you all to what my team is working on. So if you have any questions, feel free to enter in the chat box and I'd be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So again, for Professor Emmanuel Ho, please enter your questions in the chat and we'll collect them and hopefully answer them by the end of this session. And last but not least, our panelist, Nyein San, received her bachelor's degree from the University of Waterloo in Systems Design Engineering in 2004 and her master's degree from the University of Toronto in 2006. Aya is currently holds the CTO position at Cosm Medical, where she strives to change the way women affected by pelvic organ prolapse are treated. She's really trying to bridge the gap between personalized 3D printed treatment options to clinicians around the world. Previously, she was the VP Engineering at SQI Diagnostics, a publicly traded company building complex biotech analysis platforms. Here to give us more insights into her areas of research or R&D is our next panelist, Aya.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. I'm A from Cosm Medical. We are a personal pelvic health company specializing in treatment for pelvic floor disorders. Pelvic floor disorders affect 1 in 4 women and 1 in 2 women over the age of 80. It's quite common, but not very well talked about or discussed. What it is, pelvic floor disorder occurs when the muscle that supports the pelvic floor becomes weak or damaged and the organs descend. In later stages of prolapse, the organs can protrude even outside of the vagina by as much as 7 to 10 centimeters, and this is associated with a lot of pain. Symptoms include pelvic organ prolapse, urinary incontinence, and fecal incontinence. Standard treatment options are physical therapy, like doing Kegel exercises, which may work for some patients during their early stage prolapse. Another option you have is surgery, but this is associated with high reoperation and complication rates. And this led FDA to ban prolapse mesh surgery in 2019. At Cosm, we are focusing on the 3rd category of treatment, which is pessary. A pessary is a prosthetic device that can be inserted into the vagina to support the organs. The issue with current treatment and usage of pessary is that there are many different shapes and each shape has about 8 to 13 different sizes, meaning that the patient has to go through a prolonged trial and error process with the doctor. This can be taxing on both the patient and have inventory issues for the care provider. Some patients never find the right pessary that fit them, and they then end up choosing the surgery route. So at Cosm, our solution involves customization of the pessary for each of our individual bodies and needs. We call our device the Gynothotics, and we are using ultrasound imaging with AI-driven data science and 3D printing to manufacture these patient-specific pessaries. How this works is that we will have a digital health platform that integrates medical imaging and AI-assisted algorithms to personalize the Gynothotics through our clinician portal. The patient app will engage women to be involved throughout their care cycle. We are using validated questionnaires and tracking patient outcomes, then using the AI feedback loop to improve patient care. How we're using 3D printing and what 3D printing does, it enables Cosm to make economically viable and scalable customizations. When Gynothotics design gets approved by the clinician during using our web portal, we use additive manufacturing to print the 3D mold. Initially, we considered direct 3D printing of the silicone, but when we looked into it further, there are biocompatibility risks. So for right now, we are injecting silicone into 3D cocoon molds, and we are curing the silicone using traditional methods. Using this method, in February of this year, we successfully obtained Health Canada ITA approval for our investigational device. So we are very excited to begin clinical studies on this shortly. As personal Gynothotics model continue to evolve for practitioners and patients, we look forward to partnering with academic and industry leaders to advance innovation in women's healthcare. Thank you very much for having me today on the panel.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. We made it exactly on time, which is, amazing for having 5 talented people on the line. I really wanted to thank everyone for sharing your perspectives and really showcasing solutions at different technology readiness levels, from research concepts to patient-ready products. I have been able to collate a few questions, and I will do my best to moderate the discussion. And for the people on the line, I really encourage you to type up your questions. Even if we can't make it today to address them, we'll follow up offline. And again, if there are any more questions from the audience, continue to submit them. So I'm going to try to tackle the ones that came, and I'll go in order for each panelist. Hopefully I'll be able to go through all of those. So there was a question for Stu, and I'll go in the order of the presentations, but do jump in if something is relevant across your own research as well. So specifically for Stu, is there any research into growing the implant into the bone? So maybe creating an implant that can grow to seat better seat itself into the bone. For instance, 3D printing a real bone material created by the individual receiving the implant. And I think this may be for Thomas and Stu alike. I don't know if that I framed it correctly, or if I need to reiterate anything.
Sure, maybe I can start, and then I can throw it over to Tom if he wants to kind of add on to it. So again, one of the things, I think it's certainly an interesting question and an interesting topic to think about. And again, this is an exciting thing with this presentation to get people thinking about this. But one of the things is that bone wants to grow. So the bone is going to want to grow into the implant. So we have this idea where the bone's going to want to grow, especially when you have sort of a material like titanium that's going to be receptive to having bone grow on it. So bone's going to really want to grow onto titanium. So one of the things I was saying in the chat is that many newer designs include some type of latticing component to allow that bone to grow into the implant and form that strong bond over time. So this is, again, I think something we're already seeing. In terms of having materials where it would grow into bone, it does sound appealing. I think, obviously then you may bump into regulatory issues. And so I'll let Tom talk about more of the biomimetic materials. But the one thing that we have to be concerned about, and this is again why it's useful to work with lots of have this multidisciplinary research, is you also have to think about problems like infection. And so if you have the bone growing into the implant or the implant growing into bone, you have to kind of be aware of the scenario where the patient may have an infection, and how are you going to safely then remove that implant from the patient. And so this is again where we can have new and exciting ideas like this, but we have to be aware of some of the practical realities of surgery and how we can accommodate those kind of disastrous situations. Maybe I'll throw it over to Tom if he's got any follow-up.
Yeah, definitely. In like the more mainstream implants, like a total hip replacement, surgeons are very concerned about being able to go back in to remove the implant if it becomes infected or fails. Excuse me. So we're definitely balancing some of those concerns against the idea of having a more ideal fixation. And certainly over many decades, there's been research done in order to have porous surfaces and even porous materials themselves in order to facilitate a better ingrowth of bone into the implant and therefore a more robust mechanical interface. But on that, like Stu said, you trade away the ability to revise the surgery if a repair is needed or if the implant fails.
I guess as a follow-up question to that, Thomas, how do you address the need to match implant resorption rates versus bone proliferation rates in your design process? So is there any consideration to that aspect?
Yeah, definitely. And this is going to be part of the research and is to figure out materials that will be remodeled by the cells at an appropriate rate in order to not lead to, say, a mechanical failure because too much bone has been lost, or too much of the material, the graft material, has been lost before being refilled with the bone tissue itself. And so we're looking at how can we measure the resorption rate? So that's the rate at which the material is removed by bone cells. And then of course, how fast will it be refilled? But the anticipation is that, in my work anyway, is that these implants are going to be there for actually probably more than a decade and very slowly replaced with new bone.
Fantastic. Well, I hope these answers were provided enough depth for our audience. The next question is for Boxin. Lots of inquiries about what your company is called, and also along those lines, have any of the concepts that you've presented been assessed in animal studies, or are they still in the low TRL conceptual stage?
Yeah, for my lab, my student have startup. My lab also have startup because air-bound interface. We're doing some interesting work on the gel, commercialize the gels, mainly for the PPE, personal protective equipment, some for antimicrobial coatings. That's for commercialization. In terms of the soft rigid gels, we have not done animal tests yet. We aim for the outside the body application for the skin contact, but we will do in the future. But at this moment, we focus on conceptual development and material synthesis.
I guess as a follow-up to that, we had lots of questions on the line regarding what would be the real-life application of the hybrid materials that you had shown, the ones that went from soft to rigid in terms of functionality. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, the one particular example is on the orthopedic implant, like insole, where we need a particular shape to fit all the feet, because it's soft and deform, conform the shape, then become rigid to fix the shape. That's one particular application. Other application, because the changes in stiffness, we can make a smart construct deformation as on demand. And also because it's printable, we can print in the customer shape and kind of way to program it as we desire it. Yeah. The advantage is most of the material have two different set of property at different condition, like a phase diagram. This one, they have one set of condition, same temperature, same pressure, they have two different set of properties. That's unique. They can switch, reversible as well. And the condition for switching is quite mild. For them, heat up, we go to a little bit higher temperature, 60 degrees C, become very soft. Then we will trigger it to become very rigid at similar conditions.
Quite interesting. And I guess this is a question for specifically with these types of materials that can become soft or rigid depending on the heat applied or depending on external factors applied. Would those be relevant for the prosthetic that you had shown?
Yeah.
And is there a need to have these types of materials in that application as well?
Yes, there is high demand. Since we publish the work, we get a request from hospital, from research as well, to try our material. we are in plan to do this. Yeah.
And from your perspective, is that something that is relevant for instance, for some of the prosthetics that you've discussed?
Yes.
Well, for heat, I think the vagina will be body temperature. So luckily, you know, we're not seeing very much fluctuation of temperatures there. But I do see a question regarding implant fixation force later on, so I can maybe respond to that particular one in terms of forces and what is required to keep the pessary in. It's a very complex question that we are tackling with mechanical testing, bench testing for now. There are, based on different stages of prolapse, different forces are acting on the pessary, and based on the prolapse type, different direction of forces are being applied on the pessary. So we have to consider all this. And yes, this is why customization is key to making a successful pessary.
Well, thank you so much. And I think the next question is quite short but heavy loaded for Emmanuel. What are the challenges to print drug-loaded biomaterials? And I think that's a full thesis, but let's see how well we can fit an answer in a short time.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a great question, because I think the first thing that pops to everyone's mind is making sure that the drug that you're trying to load, for example, into the 3D printed implant is compatible with the manufacturing process, as well as really from from the delivery aspect, as well as also biocompatibility and so forth. So really, you have to ask yourself is, what kind of drug are you hoping to deliver? For example, if it's something that's heat labile, like a protein or peptide that can break down rapidly with high temperatures or high heat, then you probably can't use hot melt extrusion-based methods for 3D printing. You may have to explore a different option. So there's all that different kind of concerns that you have to make sure you evaluate. So there's and then also if you want to put the drug into the polymer, for example, again, even if it's heat stable, now is it able to come out of, for example, the polymeric matrix at a rate or at a concentration that's going to be therapeutically effective? So there is going to be that concern as well, and I would probably say the compatibility between the drug and the biomaterial. Right? Is there going to be any unknown interactions between the two that can potentially lead to cytotoxicity and so forth? So there's a lot of planning. It's kind of like developing any pharmaceutical formulation, right? We have to take the drug into consideration, as well as the biomaterial, the implant system into consideration. And then when you combine the two together, is there going to be some unknown effect that's going to be happening that we were not aware of initially, but need to now address later on? So those will be some of the initial thoughts. And of course, there are going to be more complex investigations into that as well.
I guess the next question as a follow-up, and I hope I'm translating the question properly in this context. Has your team considered biofilms or coatings versus infused drug delivery approaches. I hope that makes sense as far as I translated the question from the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we talk about wound healing or any types of wounds, biofilm is definitely a huge concern because it kind of impedes the therapeutic efficacy, for example, with antibiotic drug therapy. So our team has actually been developing a variety of different scaffolds and wound dressings using, for example, additive manufacturing to load them with, an antibiotic or even an antimicrobial loaded nanoparticle system. So we recognize the challenge of biofilms, and we see that as one of the first lines in which we need to tackle in order for any wound to really heal effectively. So yeah, so we're working on nanoparticles that can penetrate and reduce the formation of biofilms for sure.
Well, thank you so much. I hope that answered the audience member's question. And my next question is from Aya from Cosm. What is the typical implant fixation force required to maintain the device placement? Is this an issue with patient-specific injury, for instance, a larger prolapse requiring greater fixation, or is this accounted for in the individualization stage for each implant design?
I read that question earlier, Mihaela, and I answered that already somewhat, but
Fantastic. Maybe for the people on the line as well. And maybe as a follow-up, I'm not sure what was answered in the background, but how is, related to that, how is the AI used to inform the designs, and how accurate those designs are, or the translation of information is?
Yeah, we use AI in a few different ways. AI is applied to anatomy identification, then image segmentation, then we extract the dimension from the segmentation, and once again, AI is used to predict pessary type and shapes. In terms of accuracy, we have some data sets right now that we're working on, and as we are continuing to grow our data set, so it's very hard for me to comment on accuracy at this point.
Well, thank you so much. Lots of questions online. I hope we can make it to most of them. For Stewart and Thomas, is there any potential for instrumenting the implants to identify how well the bone is healing, or to identify if infection is setting in? I think this one's a tough one. I don't know, Thomas and Stewart, if you have any ideas on that one.
I think it really depends on the implant and the loading that the implant experiences. So it's very, very much dependent on the context.
That's fair.
Yeah, and then, but infection's interesting. Infection's interesting because you can see pH changes and biochemical changes that might be measurable with some kind of device in situ there. And mechanically, I mean, if you see a change in the interface or the stiffness of maybe the bone around the implant, that you may actually see differences in the amount of stress that the implant is carrying, and that could be measured. Possibly.
Yeah, just following up on Tom's point too, I think it also depends on the circumstances, because again, many of these implants perform quite well and have good outcomes, right? So we don't typically need to add additional technology to prove that they work. And so I think that it kind of is a balance, but again, certainly certain cases and surgeries, there's gonna be more complexity. And again, where you have a higher risk of potentially failure, that could be at risk. We do have other technologies like imaging though that play a role in this as well. And so often the surgeon may send the patient for imaging at sort of frequent intervals to gauge that healing and then know whether they have to intervene at a certain point. So certainly on the research side, there's lots happening to look at sort of sensorized bone healing detection, infection detection, but in terms of commercial implants, typically it's managed more with imaging.
And I think this is a bit of a follow-up question as well for you, Stewart. In terms of spinal implants and stress shielding, are you considering this as a factor when developing new devices in your research?
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. And I mean, it's insightful, but there's kind of two things at play there. So there's sort of the motion preservation devices, which are going to be more of like your joint replacements, and then more of the fusion type devices, which are trying to immobilize the spine to achieve bone fusion, bone-on-bone fusion. And so for a lot of what I covered today is more on the rigid fixation, trying to achieve bone fusion, where we're less concerned about motion preservation devices. Certainly there is an element to the idea of adjacent segment degeneration. So if you fuse one level, you may accelerate degeneration at the other level. There is different strategies around like how do you kind of what they would call like a soft landing, where you try to kind of transition from a rigid to maybe a softer, so you don't have those high forces on the adjacent level, which then cause, again, kind of cascade effect. So there's still, it is an unsolved problem in terms of this adjacent to segment integration. So that's where, again, one thing we're looking at with these interbody devices is also how can we have more compliant designs through things like latticing, right? So how can we better tailor so we avoid having very stiff implants to the implants that can more closely match the properties of natural bone. And I think this will then hopefully address some of those concerns in the long run.
Thank you so much. And I think another very relevant question for everyone on the line. There seems to be quite a bit of R&D in terms of 3D printing and medical devices in the startup domain, as well as within the UW community. Is this an area where Canada is receiving funding from the federal government as a priority to support startups as well as support research? So again, this is a question for everybody on the line. If you have a feedback on that.
Yeah, I would say it is. I think the Canadian government sees it as a priority and really an emerging technology in addressing a lot of aspects of a lot of different sectors as well. I was just kind of responding to that question that most recently CIHR, right, the Canadian government has funded my 3D printed intravaginal ring project. So which I'm glad to see, because again they're recognizing it, additive manufacturing as a way of addressing a lot of different sectors around Canada. So.
I don't know if anyone else has a comment. Yep.
Federal government and provincial governments, they have different mechanisms for funding and supporting this. Like Emmanuel mentioned, there's the Canadian Institutes of Health Research will fund in this area for sure. And then there are also more strategic funding opportunities that come up where they want to fund, a certain very industry related technology or set of technologies. So there's pretty good support.
There's all levels of funding. Most recently, Innovate funding. We recently applied to Innovate funding back in April, which is specifically geared towards medical imaging and personalized therapy. And there are many other additional rounds of funding, I know, supported by both federal and provincial levels.
Well, I hope both the research as well as the funding opportunities paint an optimistic future of some of these technologies in terms of a pathway to market. And I really hope that today's event provided a glimpse into how our researchers at the University of Waterloo, as well as local industry, have pushed the boundaries of interdisciplinary research to bring forth new products spanning, again, from orthopedic implants to drug delivery devices to prosthetics. The questions keep pouring in. We won't address them all. We're now nearing the end of our event, but we do hope that you are inspired to connect and engage with our University of Waterloo community to learn more about these technologies. At this point, we're still collecting questions, so don't hesitate to keep bringing them in. And I would like to thank each and every one of our panelists for sharing their vision. I would also like to thank our organizers, the Engineering Alumni Affairs Group that at the University of Waterloo, and special thanks to Vlasea, Carrie, and Rachel on the line for keeping alumni connected via outreach and events. And last but not least, I would like to thank you, our audience, for being part of today's events. The Alumni Speaker Series will return in the fall, starting in September. So this is our last event for a little while. And you will certainly receive an email to register for future events, as well as a link to today's session to watch on YouTube or to share with friends. Thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you in the fall. Thanks. Take care,
Thank you,
everyone.
Mihaela. Thank you, everyone.